everybody. Particularly thank you to Dexter for having me here today. I love this conference. I think it kind of allows people to be open and honest in a way that you don't necessarily get at other conferences. And just looking at what Hera and Matt and Kanika, who were in the last presentation, have all said, there's a kind of a thread of honesty and openness that's gone on throughout. So it's really lovely to be speaking to you all. My talk is called Sceptics United. I'm really sorry for the cockerel. My wife saw the slide yesterday and she's like, that's like a terrible KFC advert. So I'm looking for a noisy animal. But it's about how to find some sanity at a time where everything seems a bit out of control. It's largely based on digital things. This is Camp Digital after all. But it'll hopefully give you some items to reflect on in both your personal and professional lives. And even if not, it's got some pretty pictures and historical factoids to enjoy. I thought a lot about how to kick this presentation off. I spend a lot of my time with my brows slightly furrowed and being a bit grumpy about the way technology is being positioned in our lives. Because I find the background noise overwhelming, I find the pace overwhelming, I find the expectation to innovate overwhelming. On one hand, I'm a huge advocate for the positive impact technology can have to drive change and to improve services. I'm both impressed and excited by some of the developments I've witnessed in the last year, particularly. I'm a user and an active consumer of a lot of the platforms and products I'm about to throw a bit of shade on. But on the other hand, I have deep and uncomfortable doubts about the companies who are weaving their way into our lives in ever more intricate ways. I worry about the long-term impact this will have, consequences we can't possibly account for, and business models built on pure hyperbole. So this presentation is about me trying to reckon with those things in a way that I hope doesn't make me look like some hand-wringing boomer, although that's kind of what I am. Quite a lot of it is about AI, but really it's about power, money, and control. So let's begin by talking about miracles. I've got 3 bold statements to hinge this presentation on. The first, there will be no miracles here. I'm very deliberately using a piece of public art made by a human being as a starting point to a talk about technology. It's on permanent display at Edinburgh's Gallery of Modern Art, and the artist, Nathan Coley, created it as a way of exploring belief systems and to challenge prevailing myths. Because we live in a time of miracles. Just look at the way AI tools have invaded almost every piece of software we use. You might recognise that icon. It's everywhere. Sparkly, shiny, dazzling stars that promise wonderful, miraculous results. Since the dawn of graphical user interfaces, designers have grappled with icons that people can recognise that visually describe a function. With AI, it's kind of like, fuck it, let's promise them magic. My second bold statement, take everything with a pinch of salt. In the examples that I'm going to use in my slides, I'll talk about why it's best to dig deep and question prevailing norms, no matter where they're coming from. Dis and misinformation are everywhere. Public discourse is broken. It pays to ask questions. The origin of the phrase, pinch of salt, actually dates back to the Roman Empire and is linked to salt building up an antidote to poison. So it's not always been about the reliability of information. Whichever way though, it suggests the need for skepticism or reserve before believing what you're told. There are lots of examples of large language models being overly sycophantic, flattering us as users, making us feel amazing about ourselves. Every time I ask my AI agent of choice to review one of my blog posts, I get a virtual high five. Your writing is phenomenal. Such insights. So wise. Thanks, Claude. When OpenAI released the latest version of ChatGPT a couple of months ago, they got a ton of flack about how this flattery seemed to have been dialed up to 10. My favourite example of this is the one on the screen, where someone has said, "You ChatGPT just told me my literal shit in a stick business idea is genius and I should drop 30k to make it real." And ChatGPT has replied with, "Honestly," I should do this kind of valley speak, "this is absolutely brilliant. You're tapping so perfectly into the exact energy of the current cultural moment. Irony, rebellion, absurdism, authenticity, eco-consciousness, and memeability." Yeah, now I'm talking. This isn't some quirk or anomaly. It's referred to as reward hacking in the industry. People respond positively to praise, and they're more likely to take notice to use the service again if praise is being heaped upon them. AI companies are literally gaming the system. Take everything with a pinch of salt. My third bold statement is trust your gut. This might seem slightly at odds with what I've just said, where I'm suggesting we need to question things and look for evidence before heading along a particular path. But I think guts are a good gauge as well. If something previously made us sick, our gut is pretty effective at telling us not to swallow it again. I'll come back onto this later. I haven't even introduced myself yet. So my name is Hugh Wallace, as Lee introduced me as, and I'm Chief Information Officer at a company called Research Data Scotland. I've been working in and around digital technology for almost 30 years. I built my first website in 1996, and despite appearances, I still have a lot of faith in technology being a force for good. I've worked for a number of organisations where there's been a driver to create change and an objective to improve people's lives, whether that's through education, humanitarian aid, policy, or culture. I also spent 4 years at a commercial web agency, so I've done the kind of client and supplier thing. My current role is for a small and still quite new organisation, Research Data Scotland. I'm not here to talk about my current work specifically, but I thought I'd share what it is we do. I really like this statement as it gives a clear and tangible objective to our whole team's work, making it faster and simpler to access Scotland's public sector data for scientific research. Making things faster and simpler are human problems to solve. Current systems aren't slow and complicated because of technology. They're slow and complicated because of the way we've configured and confused things. Technology also might be the route to many improvements, but it still requires people, real people, to behave in certain ways and carry out tasks straightforwardly. And just to prove that I'm not in some AI denial bubble, a lot of the scientific research we facilitate is about how technology, machine learning, automation, AI can leverage better results, make new discoveries, improve people's lives using data. And this screen is about a project that was recently green-lighted with support from my organisation. So just to briefly recap what I've talked about already, no such thing as miracles, take everything with a pinch of salt, and trust your gut. It's actually the only AI-generated image that I've used in all presentation. It's always that slightly weird halo. It's got a weird fascination with the salt as well. I'm going to spend the next wee while talking about a couple of examples that I think are useful tales of how things don't necessarily work out the way we might imagine. So these two topics are a way of framing why the future we've been promised isn't always the one that transpires. So let's talk about books and glasses. To start us off, I'll talk about the long-promised death of the printed world. The sad end of books as we know it. Every new technology causes uncertainty and speculation. This paragraph of text where a lot of people are very worried about stuff, describes what? Would anyone like to hazard a guess what it's describing? It's okay if not. Oh, there's something.
Back novels.
No, but good one. But it's the popularisation of radio in the 1920s. But echoes of the same worries can be found from the onset of television in the 1950s, video recorders in the 1980s, and of course when the World Wide Web took hold in the 1990s. Next question. Does anyone take a guess about what this is? There's a little clue in the top corner. More scarily for people like me is, do people know what the blue things are?
3.5 inches.
Yeah, you're with me. So this is in fact an object that is generally accepted as the first electronic novel, published in 1994. It's Peter James' Host. It came on 2 floppy disks, that's the blue things, which you slid into your computer, then read lots of words on a screen as far as I can determine. Does the electronic version still exist? No, except in places like the Science Museum. Can you buy a printed copy? Why, yes you can. It's $12.99, all good bookstores. To continue in that vein, the Domesday Book was published in 1086. It's the manuscript record of the Great Survey of much of England and parts of Wales, completed at the behest of William the Conqueror. It's the oldest government archive held in the National Archives in Kew. The attempt to update it 900 years later sadly can't be accessed in its entirety anywhere. These laserdiscs, the thing down there, are completely defunct, as is the BBC Micros, the computer that you accessed the information on. And although some of the content is still accessible online, and every few years some brave soul tries to revive it, even these resources are in a pretty sad and scattergun state. So you've got a 1,000-year-old book, all good. 40-year-old digital project, cannot access it. A little parallel example from my own life. This is a shot from my Instagram account. Don't follow me, I don't post there anymore. I was very pleased to find this book in a house my family went to for a short stay on, for a short break in the Highlands of Scotland. I designed and typeset it in 1996, and you can still buy a physical copy of it. All of the digital media I designed around the same time. CD-ROMs, early websites, terrible animated GIFs have now disappeared into a virtual graveyard. Some stats. In the early 2010s, ebooks began to take hold, and sales outstripped physical books for the first time. The conventional wisdom at the time was that they would gradually kill off printed books. And how do we think that went? Well, shock. There's a plot twist. By the mid-2010s, the figure had started to change. And by the early 2020s, the shift is more profound. This snapshot from 2023 shows that physical book sales have continued to increase, and more so than digital book sales, and that's set against all electronic media sales, so that's ebooks as well as audiobooks. But what does this mean? And why would printed sales rally in the face of what seemed to be a surefire bet that would fall by the wayside? Well, it could depend on your information sources. Probably everyone knows that that's part of the Amazon logo. It's displayed upside down. In the early 2000s, Amazon was still seen as a young, revolutionary player, an upstart that was transforming commerce and showing us what the future looked like. Of course, Amazon also produce and sell the Kindle. They house a massive library of ebooks, and now with Audible, they have the lion's share of audiobooks too, all of which lock you into their services. Physical books are expensive to make, expensive to store, expensive to ship. So you could argue that Amazon has a vested interest in making us believe that the physical book is on its way out. But what else does it mean, or might it mean? Technology is fragile, physical objects last, digital formats come and go. Early ebook readers were clunky and unattractive, batteries started to die, the design imposes significant restrictions. What once looked like the future now looks a bit sad and dated as technology formats themselves have moved on. And no one can account for how trends change, how different platforms present new opportunities, how fickle human beings can be. 10 years ago, would anyone have predicted that a video sharing app would increase young adult fiction sales by 30% in 2023? But TikTok and BookTok, hashtag BookTok, are massive and still driving huge sales. Books like Perfection, which is about smug millennial digital natives, and it's absolutely loved by smug millennial digital natives, probably wouldn't have got a look in if it weren't for social media taking them to a whole new audience. My final point in this is not about books per se. People like physical stuff. I worked in a museum for 7 years, and believe me when I say people crave authenticity. They want to see the original, not the replica. Everyone in this photo knows what the Mona Lisa looks like, but seeing it for real, capturing the moment for themselves, having an experience is part of what makes us human. To apply my earlier, say mnemonic, I'm not sure if it is, but if you think about what the miracle might have been, we no longer need books. There's a device that does it all. The pinch of salt thought about that be, whose interests might be being served in terms of trusting your gut. I quite like real books, and I'd miss them. Caveat to all of this, newspapers and magazines are a whole other story, but we only have so much time. So next up, I want to talk about magic glasses. In the last couple of years, the concept of smart glasses has come back with a vengeance. They are big business. The market is set to rise to $2.5 billion this year. Smart glasses aren't just big business, though. According to Mark Zuckerberg, in a wide-ranging interview with The Verge last year, they're the future of computing itself. Wowza. But this isn't new, and people have been saying they're the future for 80 years. This picture comes from a seminal 1945 article by an American inventor called Vannevar Bush. The article is prescient on a number of fronts. In it, he predicts the internet, digital photography, speech recognition, and the mouse. He talks about a futuristic machine he envisages giving scholars access to a huge index repository of knowledge, any section of which could be called up with a few keystrokes. Sounds quite familiar. Also present is this concept of a camera, a little larger than a walnut, which is obviously the way people measure things. Size of nut. But the design isn't a million miles away from today's product designs, which imagines a hands-free method of capturing information for research. And ever since then, the concept of a wearable device that augments or mixes reality has been with us. If you're old like me, you might remember the 1992 film The Lawnmower Man, which culminates in a struggle for control of the virtual world and the real world. So smart glasses have been around in theory and in Hollywood for a long time. It wasn't until 2013 that Google launched Glass, the first smart glasses widely available for consumers. The product was withdrawn in 2015 after, and I quote, mixed reviews, negative press, and the big one, public outcry over privacy concerns. Which brings us to now. Where are those privacy concerns? Hey Meta, play me something chill. cringe. The privacy concerns that brought down Google Glass seem to have faded somewhat, and now smart glasses are a big and growing market. So much so that all of these companies, and this is just a snapshot, I believe there's loads more, have got skin in the game, either through products that are already on the market, or they're in an R&D phase, or they're planning their move into the space. Which, to me, is curious. There are lots of awkward questions about the proliferation of smart glasses. Almost all of them are connected to a generative AI model. There's an AI arms race happening, in case you didn't know. And glasses could just be a way for OpenAI or Meta or Google to assert their dominance. And if all those models are attached to a different AI backend, is this just a convenient way of harvesting more and more data to feed different models? As I mentioned, Google Glass was forced off the market in 2015, but 10 years on, have we all been beaten down to a point where devices that record surreptitiously our images, video and audio are accepted with a shrug and a sigh. A sigh, not a shy. And if a ton of companies are producing slightly different versions of basically the same thing, what happens to the models that don't break through? On that last point, electronic waste is a massive and growing issue. Smart glasses that don't have a proper use case and are all being developed to different standards may well be mostly destined to rot in landfill in the global south, which doesn't seem that smart. Maybe the biggest question of all still remains unanswered. Do people really want or need information impeding their field of vision? Is there real utility in this? This post from Benedict Evans, who's a former venture capitalist and now commentator on all things technology, and if I'm honest, a bit of a troll in terms of his social media post, but he posted this last week or the week before, where he's questioning, a year on from the Apple's Vision Pro launch, and saying, thinking it also applies to glasses, even if something was very light or very cheap, not actually sure that having a bunch of iPad or iPhone apps floating in the room with me is better than having an iPad or even a phone. Are these problems already been solved elsewhere? Where? So the miracle here, magic glasses, techno-utopian future. The pinch of salt, does anyone really want this? The evidence so far is that there are some use cases for image capture and audio, but maybe not much more. And trust your gut. If some of the companies who've been already done quite a lot of damage with their products are punting this, does it pass the smell test? Question. This is my terrible joke. Cat paws, small paws. They're not big. That was the limit to take a breath. I should remember that. Let's take a breath. My worry is that confidence is getting in the way of curiosity and clarity. In the same way that large language models will return you results which confidently make up an answer, the people responsible for these technologies, and to a certain extent those who are reporting on them, make claims with unbridled confidence. There's no room at the bar for humility. And big, bold, breathless statements made by powerful men, because it's almost always men, still seem to carry a lot of weight. Where's the curiosity? Where's the sense of working through problems together? Let's go back to Mark's previous statement. You're going to wake up, you. Not you might, or you may wake up, you will. This will be the main way we do computing. Here's another bullshit statement from the same man about the metaverse. Meta have poured $46 billion into the metaverse on pure hubris. Is anyone here? Metaverse, or what even is the metaverse? But I won't go there. Think about the positive changes you could make in the world if you sank in $50 million. value for shareholders impedes value for humanity. The statements that Zuckerberg made aren't designed for us, for you and me. They're signals to the market. We have new stuff, we're continuing to innovate, we've got new ideas that will make money, although in the metaverse example, maybe not. And that means questions of ethics, of value, of actual utility, all the points that Hera was making in her opening talk this morning, they get pushed to one side. And you could very well ask, has this not always been the way? This is a screen grab from the final episode of Mad Men Series 1, where Don Draper transfixes the room with the miracle of Kodak's new technology. He knows he's selling a lifestyle, not a product. Have we not always, or at least for the last century, been subject to these market forces? Well, yes. But I'd argue that it's getting more and more difficult to discern, to cut out the background noise, to make informed choices because of the barrage of information we're all subjected to. And because of this confusion, I think we start to crave some of that certainty. Here are some statements made this year by some of the main players in the AI market. If you look at the one in the middle, Gartner is saying that customer service is going to be resolved by the end of the decade, thanks to some chatbots. Hooray! OpenAI are talking about elevating humanity by increasing abundance. The quote at the top is from Demis Hassabis, who's the CEO of Google DeepMind. And he's asked about the next 20 years. I think it's stunning. If everything goes well, then we should be in an era of radical abundance, a kind of golden era. AGI, that's artificial general intelligence, can solve what I call root node problems in the world, curing terrible diseases, much healthier and longer lifespans, finding new energy sources. If that all happens, then it should be an era of maximum human flourishing, where we travel to the stars and colonise the galaxy. I think that will begin to happen in 2030. I think this answer from an interview in Wired magazine proves you can be simultaneously a very smart man and totally full of shit. Just need to swear a few times. I far prefer Benedict Evans' slides. All AI questions have one of two answers. If you ask an AI question, one answer might be it will work like every other platform shift. Trial, error, failure, success, we'll get there by iteration. It won't be that such a big a deal. But the other answer is no one knows. The uncertain answer is no one knows. And so, another pause. To go back to the theme of my talk, I genuinely believe we've all got a role to play in getting the right balance. I would hope you come to a conference like this to learn about different perspectives. And I guess the one thing I'd urge you to do, if what I've been saying resonates, is to join with others to ask important questions. I'd underline the point that this is scepticism, and I call it healthy scepticism. It's not about being cynical or punching holes for the sake of it. It's about the fact that the right questions matter. And if my mnemonic doesn't work for you, here are some simple questions to ask. Is it too good to be true? Where's the evidence? And what's my instinct? My instinct. Your instinct, you matter in this. Final thought. Back to books. Just don't take my word for it. There are loads of people much cleverer than me who publish books with their own take on tech skepticism. There's a few on screen here. There's also a load of newsletters I could recommend, so I'll find a way of sharing afterwards. I'd say it's also worth keeping your eye on Rachel Caldicutt's Society for Hopeful Technologists, which is her attempt to bring like-minded folk together to nut out some of these questions. So with that, thank you. can find me on Blue Sky. I'm on LinkedIn more than I'd care to admit. And like every white middle-aged man, thanks Jukesy, I publish an occasional newsletter where I talk about some of this sort of stuff. The QR code will take you there. But thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Hugh. We've got about 5 minutes left if you're able to take some questions, if that's okay. Anyone got one? Any hands?
As long as I can pull up ChatGPT and I can get the answers from it, I'll be just fine. It's cool if not.
Any thoughts, if not questions?
I don't know if I have a question. I don't know if I've formulated the question yet, but I have thoughts about everything that you've said. I thought it was really interesting, because I feel like I am quite sceptical about AI, and I'm quite scared of it. As someone who works in content, I feel like there's very much a sense that it's coming from my job. But it also feels like it's sort of it's a technology that was made before they thought of the use case for the technology. And now it's like, okay, this thing exists, how do we just shoehorn it into everything? I guess my question is around how do we make sure that we have a use case, and how do we push back against it if the use case isn't there in this world where everyone is saying, use this amazing magical new technology? Like, how do we say, do we need to, if that makes sense?
It makes total sense. I think when you scratch the surface, not everyone is, pushing this forward relentlessly, but you would think from some of the discourse that they are. And so I think, everyone's going to have different contexts, they'll work for different organisations, they'll have, different opportunities and challenges, but it is just that, it's that pushback, and, it's been the same with lots of digital adoption or any kind of technological adoption over the years. It's trying to, just keep being the person that asks the awkward questions in the room. If you're, feel you're able to, if you're in the privileged enough position to be able to do that. But, don't just go full scale and adopt things without trying to get that problem statement sussed out first. Be nice to me, Alex.
I am. I also worked in museums for a while. One of the things I was sort of thinking as you were talking about things getting lost on the internet was how the internet kind of doesn't let us imagine that things could be ephemera.
Yeah.
But maybe it's good, maybe we don't need everything. And I was wondering about how do we, with the affordances of the internet, try and allow it to be a machine that forgets, especially considering like 10 years ago, there was all that kind of fuss of, should we delete everything that a teenager ever does online when they turn 18 so that they can have a fresh start? And now, like, discovering that the internet is actually as forgetful as us has been kind of weirdly relieving. Yes?
Yes. I can't actually see Adam in my field of vision here, who also used to work for museums, and his experience, my experience, well, your experience is this kind of relentless rush to digitise everything, but the context for what you were actually digitising. And again, the takeaway ephemera, if something is a sculpture, or it's a bit of a car, or it's a totem pole. Just trying to think of things that were or if it's Dolly the sheep, which is in the National Museum of Scotland. There isn't a way of recreating that online that kind of gives the same impact of the authentic item. Yes, there are really useful routes into information, but there was always kind of missing context around some of those questions, and quite a lot of that funding in the early days. I don't know if it's changed. I've been out of that field for a wee while, but that kind of, maybe it's okay to forget, it's probably a really good question to pose. If you're building an exhibition or deciding a new gallery design.
More here?
Thanks, it was a really reassuring talk. I'm glad you surfaced all that stuff. I was curious if you had any more thinking or thoughts on the different ownership models behind the technology that you touched on at the beginning, because I often wonder, like, what would Amazon look like if it was a cooperative, or, you know, how does that influence how these technologies play out in the world?
Oh, it's so difficult. And so I'm going to deflect that with was part of a conference a couple of weeks ago, Gov Campus Scotland, where there was a question. I wasn't in this session, so I can't give examples, but there was a question about what if government was evil like Google. I think that was the topic. So it's a slightly different framing of that, but it's almost like, you know, what if our public services were a bit more cutthroat? You're positing is what if there's a different model for, you know, the corporations and the conglomerates that now rule our lives. I don't know. You know, OpenAI started as a not-for-profit supposedly, and now it's you know, it's really not that. It is going for hell for leather to try and take over the world, basically. So yeah, I don't know. Let's work on it together.
1 minute, it's a really quick one. Okay.
I've never worked in museums, so I might mess up this example, but I was wondering if you had any thoughts about getting organisations to see things like privacy and security as a threat to them. So thinking about the British Museum and their recent hack, and then having made a decision a period of time ago to only acquire books in e-book, and obviously they've lost access to all of them. So anyway, along those lines, I guess.
Again, maybe it's like, I think there's a whole other presentation that is about, which is not about skepticism, but it's getting organisations to focus on the real things and kind of making infrastructure set, you know, making some of those, you know, where some of the real live threats are as important as the shiny thing or the must-have idea that's come through either the media or through social media.
Great. Thank you very much. It's a good food for thought.